30 years of paying the mortgage ended with a suitcase on the porch and my daughter locking the door in my face. She called it moving forward. I walked into the bank, just to withdraw $200 to survive the night. But then the manager stared at my screen and asked the question that would eventually ruin her life. Do you have any idea how rich you actually are? My name is Margaret Holloway. I am 56 years old, a widow, and a woman who has spent the entirety of her adult life making herself smaller so that her family could grow larger. I stood in the center of the living room, a space I had painted a soft beige 20 years ago to hide the scuff marks of a childhood that had long since passed. The air in the house was stagnant. It smelled of the expensive lavender diffuser my daughter, Lauren, had bought last week. Lauren stood by the kitchen island, her posture rigid, her fingers swiping across the screen of her tablet. She did not look at me. She looked at a schedule. She looked at a problem that needed to be solved. It is not about feelings. Mother, Lauren said, her voice smooth and detached, like the automated recording of a bank helpline. It is about optimization. David and I need the space for the home office. We are expanding. It is simply inefficient to have you occupying the master suite when you contribute so little to the current household overhead. I looked at her. I looked at the child, whose fevered forehead I had cooled with damp washcloths at 3 a.m. I looked at the woman who was now speaking to me using words like optimization and overhead. I paid for this house. Lauren, I said. My voice was steady, but my hands were shaking at my sides. I paid the mortgage for 30 years. I paid it when your father left. I paid it when the roof leaked and we had to use buckets. I paid it. Lauren finally looked up. Her eyes were dry. There was no guilt in them, only a mild annoyance, as if I were a software update that was taking too long to install. And we appreciate that historical contribution, she said, emphasizing the word historical as if it meant obsolete. But the deed is in my name now. You signed it over. Remember, it was the logical move for estate planning. This is my house. And frankly, having you here is stifling our growth. I have rented you a very sensible studio apartment on the east side. It is paid up for 2 months. It is a chance for you to have a new life. A new life. That was what she called being evicted from the home I had built. I did not scream. I did not throw the vase that sat on the mantelpiece. I simply felt a cold numbness spread from my chest to my fingertips. I turned away from her. I walked to the hallway where my single suitcase stood waiting. It was the large red one I had bought for a family vacation 10 years ago. Now, it contained everything I owned. I took the handle. I pulled. The wheels rumbled over the hardwood floor. It was a hollow, grinding sound. I walked to the front door. I waited for a moment, a foolish, desperate moment, hoping she would call out, hoping she would run after me and say it was a mistake. Silence. I opened the door and stepped out into the afternoon sun. I pulled the suitcase over the threshold. The door clicked shut behind me. It was a soft sound, but it felt like a gunshot. I stood on the porch. The neighborhood was quiet. Mrs. Higgins across the street was watering her hydrangeas, but she did not look up. The silence of the street felt heavy, like a judgment. It was as if the concrete and the trees knew I had been rejected. I reached into my pocket to touch my keys, a habit ingrained over decades. My fingers met only the lining of my coat. I remembered then. Lauren had asked for my set yesterday to make a spare for the gardener. She had never given it back. I realized I was standing on the property of a stranger. I had no way back inside. A wave of nausea hit me. It was a physical blow. I had been discarded. My own blood, the life I had nurtured, had cut me out like a withered branch. I looked at the closed door. I looked at the windows that reflected the sky, blinding and indifferent. Where did I go wrong? I whispered. I did. Everything. The question floated into the empty air, unanswered. I gripped the handle of my suitcase tighter, my knuckles turning white, and began the long walk down the driveway. I sat on a wooden bench at the bus stop 3 blocks away from the house, the plastic handle of my suitcase still warm from my grip. My mind did not stay on the empty street. It drifted back, peeling away the layers of time to find the moment where the rot had truly begun. I was 22 when I married Richard, and I was 26 when he left. He did not leave with a shout or a fight. He simply packed a bag much smaller than the one sitting beside me now and walked out while Lauren was playing with wooden blocks on the living room rug. She was only 4 years old. She did not look up when the door closed. She did not know that her father had just resigned from our lives. I did not have the luxury of collapsing. I had a daughter. I secured a job at a private financial firm called Northbridge Asset Office. It was a demanding, high-pressure environment, a place of sharp suits and sharper tongues. I was not a shark, but I learned to swim among them. I worked 12 to 14 hours a day. I was the first to arrive and the last to turn off the lights. I missed school plays. I missed the moment Lauren lost her first tooth. I missed the quiet, golden hours of her childhood because I was too busy buying her a future. It is for her, I would whisper to myself as I drove home in the dark, my eyes burning from staring at spreadsheets. Every form I filled out at Northbridge, every insurance policy, every retirement account, had one name on the beneficiary line, Lauren Holloway. It was automatic. I did not view myself as a person with needs. I was simply a vessel used to transfer resources to her. I wore coats until the elbows wore through so she could have brand-name jeans. I skipped lunch so she could have ballet lessons. Lauren grew up in a world where want did not exist. I ensured the fridge was always full and her clothes were always new. But in filling her life with things, I left a hollow space where empathy should have grown. I remembered the first time I felt the sting of her indifference. She was 16. I had come home after a double shift, my feet swollen and my head pounding. "Mum, you forgot to sign the permission slip for the trip," she had said. She did not look at my exhausted face. She was looking at the television. "I am sorry, honey. I was so tired I must have missed it," I had said, sinking onto the sofa. Lauren had rolled her eyes, a gesture of supreme annoyance. "Great. Now I have to go into the office early to beg the secretary. You really need to be more organized." I should have stopped her then. I should have told her about the 14 hours I had just worked to pay for that trip. But I did not. I apologized. "She is just stressed," I told myself. "It is just her age. She does not mean it." I built a wall of excuses. I told myself that her generation was different, that they were more direct, less sentimental. I refused to see the truth. The truth was that I was teaching her a terrible lesson. I was teaching her that my sacrifice was a natural phenomenon, like gravity or sunlight. It was something she was entitled to. I remembered a conversation from 2 years ago. We were discussing a neighbor who had moved her elderly mother into her home. Lauren had scoffed, sipping her iced tea. "It is ridiculous. It destroys the nuclear family dynamic. If you cannot support yourself, you should not be a burden on others. It is just inefficient. But Lauren, she is family, I had argued gently. Family is not a free pass to be a parasite. Mother, she had replied coldly. I had laughed it off then, thinking she was just being cynical. Now, sitting on the bench with nowhere to go, the memory felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I had spent my life building a pedestal for her, and she had used it to look down on me. I had given her everything, and in doing so, I had convinced her that I was worth nothing. The conversation that severed the last thread between us had taken place only 24 hours before I found myself on the street. It happened at the kitchen table, the same table where I had taught Lauren how to hold a spoon and how to write her name in cursive. The surface was clean, devoid of crumbs or warmth, occupied only by a sleek laptop and a stack of documents organized with terrifying precision. Lauren did not shout. She did not cry. She simply folded her hands on top of the papers and looked at me with the calm, flat expression of a surgeon deciding to amputate a limb. "We need to discuss the asset restructuring," Lauren said. Her voice was steady, devoid of any inflection that might suggest we were discussing my home and not a fluctuating stock. "David and I have been reviewing the portfolio. Holding on to this property in its current state is financial suicide. The equity is stagnating. We need to leverage the capital for a new venture in the tech sector." I stared at her, my coffee cup suspended halfway to my mouth. I did not understand the jargon she was using, or perhaps I simply refused to process it. "Restructuring?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "Lauren, this is my house. I am not a portfolio. I am your mother." Lauren sighed, a short, sharp sound through her nose. She tapped a fingernail against the documents. "That is the problem. Mom, you are too emotional about bricks and mortar. And technically, it is not your house. Not anymore." The air in the room seemed to vanish. My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" I whispered. 3 years ago, Lauren said, opening a blue folder and sliding a document toward me. "When you were worried about the tax implications for your retirement, you signed the quitclaim deed. You transferred the title to me to protect the asset. It was a standard estate planning procedure. You agreed that it was the smartest move for the family." I looked down at the paper. There it was, my signature. The ink was black and firm. I remembered that day. Lauren had come over with a notary, smiling, telling me it was just paperwork to ensure the government did not take anything if I got sick. I had not read the fine print. I had not read a single paragraph. I had looked at my daughter's face, seen the child I had raised, and I had signed where she pointed. I stammered, feeling the blood drain from my face. I thought that was for when I died. I thought, "I was just securing things for you." "And you did," Lauren replied, closing the folder. "You secured the asset. Now, as the legal owner, I am making the executive decision to liquidate and reinvest. Staying here is inefficient for everyone. The studio apartment I found for you is smaller, easier to clean, and closer to the bus line. It is a logical downgrade. A downgrade," I repeated. The word tasted like ash. "I am 56 years old. You are evicting me. I am relocating you," she corrected, her tone icy. "Please, do not make a scene. It is a legal process. I have the right to manage my property as I see fit. If you make this difficult, It will only strain our relationship further. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized the horror of my situation. There was no villain in a mask breaking into my home. There was only my daughter. I had handed her the weapon she was now using to execute me. I had taught her that my needs were secondary, and she had learned the lesson so well that she had erased my needs entirely. I did not scream. I did not beg. The realization was too heavy for noise. I simply stood up. My legs felt like lead. I trusted you, I said. My voice was barely audible. Lauren did not flinch. She turned her attention back to her laptop screen. And I am handling that trust with fiscal responsibility. You should pack tonight. The movers come at 8 in the morning. That was the end of it. There was no slammed door then, only the soft click of her typing keys. But as I walked out of the kitchen, I felt a massive, invisible gate slam shut between us. The silence that followed was not peaceful. It was the silence of a tomb. And now, standing outside with no keys and no home, that silence was the only thing I had left. I dragged my suitcase through the heavy glass doors of the First National Bank branch on 4th Street. The air inside was conditioned to a sterile chill, smelling faintly of carpet cleaner and old paper. I felt small. I felt visible in the worst possible way. A 56-year-old woman with a red suitcase and nowhere to go, standing in line behind a young man depositing a stack of checks. When it was my turn, I approached the teller window. I kept my eyes down. I did not want to see pity. I need to make a withdrawal. I said softly, just $200, please, from my checking account. The teller, a young woman with bright pink fingernails, took my card and typed into her keyboard. She stopped. She frowned. She typed again, harder this time, as if the keys were resisting her. Then she looked up at me, her eyes wide. One moment, Mrs. Holloway, she said. Her voice was tight. She stepped away from the window. I felt a surge of panic. Had Lauren frozen the account? Was I completely penniless? My hands gripped the marble counter. I prepared myself for the humiliation of being escorted out by security. Instead, a man in a grey suit walked out from the back offices. He looked to be in his late 40s, balding, with wire-rimmed glasses that magnified his intense, dark eyes. I recognized him vaguely. Mr. Daniel Reeves, the branch manager. Mrs. Holloway, he asked. He did not sound accusatory. He sounded urgent. Please, come into my office. Is there a problem? I asked, my voice trembling. If the account is empty, I can leave. Please, he repeated, gesturing toward his door. I followed him. I left my suitcase near the door of his office, afraid to bring it in and dirty the carpet. I sat in the leather chair across from his desk. He did not sit. He stood by his computer monitor, tapping a pen against his chin, staring at me. Mrs. Holloway, Daniel said. He leaned forward, placing both hands on the desk. I was reviewing the daily high-value flags when your name popped up. I have to ask you a question, and I need you to answer me honestly. My heart hammered against my ribs. What is it? He looked me dead in the eye. Do you have any idea how rich you actually are? The question hung in the air, absurd and cruel. I let out a dry, nervous laugh. I think you have the wrong person. Mr. Reeves, I said. I have maybe $3,000 in my savings, and checking is probably low. My daughter handles the larger expenses. Daniel shook his head slowly. He turned the monitor around so I could see the screen. You worked for Northbridge Asset Office for 22 years, correct? He asked. Yes, I said, but I was just back office support. I left 5 years ago. And during that time, you were enrolled in the Employee Stock Ownership Plan and the Automatic Dividend Reinvestment Program, Daniel said. He pointed a finger at a figure on the screen. You opted for the maximum deduction from your paycheck back in 1992. You never changed it. You never cashed it out. I squinted at the screen. The numbers were black against a white background. They looked like phone numbers. I forgot about that, I whispered. I was so busy. I just let the paperwork pile up. I thought it was pennies. Northbridge went public in 1998, Daniel said, his voice dropping to a hush. And they have split their stock 4 times since then. The dividends have been compounding in a high-yield trust account linked to your Social Security number, not your joint account with your daughter. This account has been dormant, Mrs. Holloway, but it has been growing. My eyes focused on the bottom line, total consolidated assets. That says, I started, but my throat closed up. It says $4,822,641.12. Daniel read aloud. He spoke the numbers clearly, giving each digit its own weight. I sat back in the chair. The room spun. $4 million. I had been eating instant noodles to save money for Lauren's new patio furniture. I had been wearing shoes with holes in the soles while I sat on a fortune. This is mine, I asked. Truly mine. It is exclusively yours, Daniel said. Your name is the only one on the trust. No beneficiaries are listed for access, only for inheritance. Unless you sign a transfer, nobody else can touch a single cent of this. I looked at my hands. They were the same hands that had dragged a suitcase out of a house I had paid for, only to be kicked to the curb. I thought of Lauren's face when she talked about efficiency. I thought of the way she had looked at me, like I was a bad investment. I am not poor, I breathed. The realization hit me like a physical shock, starting in my spine and shooting out to my extremities. No. Ma'am, Daniel said, a small, grim smile touching his lips. You are likely the wealthiest client in this branch today. I looked at the screen again. The numbers did not just represent money, they represented power. For the first time in 30 years, the balance of the world shifted. I was not the victim anymore. I was the bank. Daniel Reeves did not let the silence linger. He began to click through the tabs on his screen, his movements precise and clinical. He was peeling back the layers of my financial history to reveal the gold hidden underneath. You signed up for the aggressive growth tier in 1992, he said, pointing to a column of green figures. Do you remember? It was an automatic deduction. 3% of your gross income. I remember, I stammered, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. I thought it was for a pension. I never looked at the statements. I threw them in a drawer. I was always so tired, Mr. Reeves. I just wanted to sleep. Well, that fatigue made you a millionaire, Daniel said bluntly. Northbridge acquired 3 major tech startups in the early 2000s. Your shares split, then they split again, and because you never withdrew the dividends, they reinvested, compounded, over and over again. While you were working overtime, your money was working harder. He opened another window. This one showed a pie chart divided into colourful slices. Lauren has power of attorney over your checking account and the deed to the house, Daniel said, his tone shifting to something sharper. I see the transfer records here. She moved the house title 3 years ago. She has been draining the joint account for what she labels as maintenance costs. But these... He tapped the screen hard. These are independent trusts. They are under your employee ID, not your family name. She cannot see them. She cannot touch them. To her, they do not exist. I stared at the screen. I saw the breakdown. There was a primary equity fund. There was a bond maturity ladder that had started paying out last year. There was a high-yield liquid savings account that had been accumulating interest for a decade. So, she took the crumbs. I whispered, a strange sensation rising in my chest. She kicked me out for the crumbs. Precisely, Daniel said. She took the house, which is a depreciating asset in this market, and left you with the capital. It is ironic, really. She thinks she stripped you bare, but she actually cut you loose from the heavy lifting. I sat back. The leather of the chair creaked. For years, I had defined my worth by what I could give to Lauren. I had measured my poverty by the price of eggs and the electricity bill. I had walked around with my head down, apologizing for my existence, believing I was a burden. But I wasn't poor. I had never been poor. I had simply been blind. What can I do with this? I asked. My hands had stopped shaking. Daniel leaned back, clasping his hands behind his head. You have total liquidity on the savings. That is over $600,000 available today. The stocks can be liquidated in 3 business days. You can buy a house in the Hamptons cash. You can travel the world. You can start a business. You can do whatever you want. Margaret. I looked at the withdrawal slip on the desk. $200. It looked pathetic now. It looked like a joke. Does she know? I asked. Does the system alert her? Daniel replied immediately. We are a private bank. Unless you authorize a disclosure, this is between you and me. As far as your daughter knows, you are destitute. A thought sparked in the back of my mind. It was cold and bright, like a match struck in a dark room. Lauren valued efficiency. She valued capital. She valued power. She had discarded me because she thought I had none of those things. She was building her life, her reputation, and her business on the assumption that she was the financial pillar of the family. But she wasn't. I looked at Daniel. I saw a glint of understanding in his eyes. He knew I had been wronged. He was handing me a loaded gun. I do not want to buy a house in the Hamptons, I said slowly. The tremble was gone from my voice. What do you want to do? Daniel asked. I thought of the lock on my front door. I thought of my suitcase standing alone on the porch. I thought of the way Lauren had looked at me, as if I were an expired coupon. I want to restructure, I said, using the word she had used against me. I want to move everything, every cent. I want to put it where she can never find it. And then, I want to watch. Daniel smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was a professional smile. I can have the paperwork ready in 10 minutes, he said. Do it. I said. I moved into the studio apartment Lauren had rented for me on a Tuesday afternoon. It was a converted garage in a part of town where the streetlights flickered and the sidewalks were cracked by aggressive weeds. The space was small, smelling faintly of mildew and someone else's burnt toast. A week ago, this humiliation would have broken me. I would have sat on the sagging twin mattress and wept into my hands. But I did not weep. I sat on the edge of the bed, opened my laptop and logged into the secure portal Daniel Reeves had set up for me. I did not call Lauren. I did not send her a text message to tell her I had arrived safely. I simply vanished from her radar. In her mind, I was likely sulking, learning my lesson about financial dependency. In reality, I was moving mountains. For the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life. To the outside world, I was an aging widow in a cheap apartment, eating canned soup and taking the bus. To the financial world, I was a shark. I spent my days in video conferences with Daniel and a specialized estate attorney he had recommended. We were surgical. We transferred the $4 million out of the old Northbridge trusts and into a series of diversified, impenetrable holding companies. We revoked every previous will, every power of attorney, and every medical proxy that bore Lauren's name. "Are you sure you want to cut all ties this cleanly?" the attorney asked me during one session. Usually, clients leave a nominal amount to avoid contestation. "No," I said, my voice flat. She wanted efficiency. I am giving her 0. That is the most efficient number there is. While I moved my millions, I watched Lauren spend her thousands. I created a burner account on social media, a faceless profile that allowed me to view her life without her knowing. It was fascinating. It was like watching a play where the lead actress has forgotten her lines but keeps smiling at the audience. Lauren was posting daily. She posted photos of my old house, now stripped of my furniture. She posted pictures of swatches for expensive Italian marble and custom cabinetry. She wrote long, inspirational captions about the power of self-reliance and the grit required to build a legacy. Renovation mode. On. One caption read, "Sometimes you have to trim the dead weight to let the new growth bloom. Self-made boss babe. New chapter. Dead weight." That was me. I zoomed in on the photo. I saw the contractors in the background. I recognized the logo on their trucks. They were the most expensive firm in the city. Lauren was burning through the equity in the house, likely taking out high-interest loans against the property value, assuming she had the safety net of my future inheritance to catch her if she fell. She believed that, even if she failed, there was still money tucked away in my name that she would eventually control. She was building a castle on a foundation of clouds. I saw her announcing a launch party for her new consulting brand. She was selling herself as a financial guru, a woman who knew how to optimize assets. The irony was so sharp it almost drew blood. She was lecturing strangers on wealth management while unknowingly standing on the precipice of ruin. I sat in my dark, cramping apartment, eating a sandwich that cost $3, and I felt a strange sense of peace. I did not need to scream at her. I did not need to storm into her office and demand respect. I only needed to wait. "You are quiet today," Daniel said to me over the phone on a Friday morning. "Everything all right? I am just watching the market," I said, staring at a photo of Lauren holding a glass of champagne. "I am waiting for the correction. The transfer is complete," Daniel informed me. "The new trust is active. Your daughter has absolutely no claim. And Margaret. The dividend payout hits next week. It is substantial. Keep it in the accumulation fund," I instructed. "I do not need to buy anything yet." I hung up. I looked at the screen one last time. Lauren looked radiant, confident, and utterly oblivious. She thought she had won the game because she had captured the king. She did not realize I had taken the entire board away. I closed the laptop. The room was silent. It was not the silence of abandonment anymore. It was the silence of a hunter waiting in the tall grass. The first domino fell on a rainy Thursday morning. I was sitting in the plush office of my new attorney, Mr. Sterling, a man whose hourly rate was higher than what I used to spend on groceries for a month. On the mahogany desk sat a stack of documents that represented the invisible safety net I had provided for Lauren throughout her adult life. "These are the surety bonds for your daughter's business line of credit," Mr. Sterling said, tapping the paper with a gold pen. "And here is the collateral agreement for the home renovation loan. You are listed as the primary guarantor. If we remove your name and your assets from the equation, the bank will immediately recalculate her risk profile." "And what happens then?" I asked, taking a sip of the sparkling water he had offered me. "Her interest rates will skyrocket," he explained calmly. "Or, more likely, the bank will demand immediate repayment of the principal to reduce their exposure. Without your credit history backing her, she is statistically insolvent." I looked at the signature line. It was the last thread connecting me to the person who had evicted me. "Cut it," I said. "Sever everything." I signed the papers. It was a silent violence, far more effective than any scream. 3 days later, the chaos began. I watched it unfold through the glowing screen of my laptop in my dimly lit apartment. The first sign was a vague post on Lauren's business page. Unexpected delays with the contractors due to bureaucratic red tape. "We are pivoting. Resilience. Entrepreneur life." I knew exactly what that red tape was. Her funding had frozen. The contractors had likely packed up their tools the moment the check bounced or the credit line turned red. By the end of the week, the tone of her digital footprint had shifted from confident to manic. She was posting too much, trying to drown out the reality with noise. But I saw the cracks. I saw the post where she was selling her designer handbags, claiming she was embracing minimalism. Then the phone calls started. My phone lit up on the small kitchen table. Lauren calling. I did not answer. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. 10 minutes later, it rang again and again. I listened to the first voicemail. Her voice was sharp, annoyed, the voice of a manager dealing with an incompetent employee. "Mother, call me back. The bank made some clerical error regarding the renovation loan. They are saying you withdrew your guarantee. It is obviously a mistake in their system, but I need you to come down here and sign a reinstatement form. It is holding up the marble installation. Call me." I deleted the message. I took a bite of my apple. It tasted sweet. 2 days passed. The silence from my end was absolute. I did not go to the bank. I did not go to the house. I simply existed in the void I had created. The next call came at midnight. I let it go to voicemail. When I played it back the next morning, the annoyance was gone. In its place was a tremor of genuine confusion. "Mom, I cannot get a hold of anyone at Northbridge. They are saying my accounts are frozen pending a liquidity review. Did you touch something? David is freaking out because the contractors are threatening to sue. Just pick up the phone." "Okay, we need to fix this." I looked at the phone. For years, I had jumped every time she called. I had dropped everything to fix her problems, to soothe her ego, to pay her bills. I had trained her to believe that I was an infinite resource. Now, she was learning the physics of scarcity. I sat by the window and watched the rain streak against the glass. I imagined her in that big, half-finished house, surrounded by torn-up floors and exposed wiring, realizing that the money tap had run dry. She was discovering that independence was very expensive when you actually had to pay for it yourself. I did not call back. I poured myself a cup of tea and waited. The desperation was only beginning. Lauren found me 3 weeks after I had moved into the studio apartment. I had not given her the address, but desperate people have a way of finding things when their survival depends on it. It was a Tuesday evening, and the rain was hammering against the metal roof of the converted garage. The knock on the door was not polite. It was frantic. I opened the door to find my daughter standing in the downpour. She looked nothing like the woman who had evicted me a month ago. Her hair was frizzy and damp. Her designer coat was stained with mud at the hem, and her eyes were wild, rimmed with red exhaustion. "You!" She breathed, the word coming out like a curse. "You are here." I stepped back to let her in. The room was small, forcing us into an intimacy neither of us wanted. She looked around at the peeling paint and the mismatched furniture with a sneer of disgust. But she did not have the luxury of judgment anymore. "Why are you doing this to me?" Lauren demanded, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. "Do you have any idea what is happening?" "The bank called the loan. They are threatening foreclosure because the guarantor withdrew. That was you. You did that. You deliberately sabotaged the renovation." I sat down on the single wooden chair in the room. I folded my hands in my lap. I did not offer her a seat. I did not sabotage anything. "Lauren," I said calmly. "I simply removed my name from financial obligations that are no longer mine. You wanted the house. You wanted the title. You wanted the control. I gave you all of it." "You know I cannot carry that loan alone," she shouted, throwing her hands up. "David's business is in a slump. We needed your credit history to secure the bridge financing. You knew that you are trying to destroy us out of spite because of the move." "The move?" I repeated. "Is that what we are calling it? You kicked me out. Lauren, you told me I was inefficient." Lauren's face crumbled. The anger drained away, replaced by a terrifying, naked panic. She stepped closer, her hands reaching out but stopping short of touching me. "Mom, please," she stammered, her voice breaking. I am sorry if I was harsh. It was just the stress. But this is serious. The contractors have walked off the job. We are living in a construction zone with no walls. We have no cash flow. You have to sign the reinstatement. Please. Just sign it. And we can talk about you moving back in. We can fix the basement for you. It is private." I looked at her. I saw the child I had protected for 30 years. I saw the woman who believed that her comfort was the axis upon which the world turned. She was offering me the basement of the house I had paid for, and she thought she was being generous. "I do not want the basement," I said softly. "And I do not want the house." "Then what do you want?" she cried, tears spilling onto her cheeks. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to know the truth," I said. I picked up a file folder from the table and held it out to her. She took it, her hands shaking. "Open it." I commanded. She flipped it open. She saw the statements. She saw the withdrawal records. She saw the trust fund balances that had been moved, the millions of dollars that had silently underpinned her entire existence. Her eyes widened. She gasped, a wet, choking sound. This is $4 million, she whispered. Where did this come from? Dad didn't leave this?" "No," I said. "I earned it. I earned it while I was working 14 hours a day. I earned it while I was wearing second-hand clothes so you could have the best. You thought I was poor. Lauren, You thought I was a burden. You looked at me and saw overhead costs, but I was the bank. I was the foundation. And you took a sledgehammer to the only thing holding you up. She looked up at me, her face pale as a sheet. You have millions, she said, her voice trembling with a mix of awe and horror. You have millions, and you let me take out loans. You let me struggle. I let you live in a house I paid for, mortgage-free, for your entire adult life. I countered, my voice hardening. I let you pretend you were self-made. But the moment you decided I was no longer useful, the moment you put me on the street, you chose to be independent. Truly independent. You have to help me, she pleaded, clutching the papers. Mom, look at this money. You could pay off the renovation in a check. You could buy David's company. We are family. You cannot just watch us drown. I am not drowning, I said. You are. And you are drowning because you threw away the life raft, because you did not like the way it looked. I am your daughter, she screamed, the entitlement roaring back to the surface. You owe me. That is what mothers do. They help. I am done helping you hurt me. I said. I stood up and walked to the door. I opened it. The rain was still falling. Go home. Lauren, I said. She stared at me. She looked at the file in her hand, then at my face. She was waiting for me to crack. She was waiting for the apology. She was waiting for the mother who would set herself on fire to keep her child warm. That mother did not live here anymore. You are a monster, she spat, throwing the file onto the floor. No, I said. I am just a woman who finally checked her bank balance. She stormed out into the rain. I watched her run to her car, her expensive heels slipping in the mud. She slammed the door and sped away, her taillights blurring in the dark. I closed the door and locked it. My hands were steady. I picked up the file from the floor and placed it back on the table. The silence returned, but this time, it did not feel empty. It felt like justice. The collapse of Lauren's empire was not a loud explosion. It was a slow, humiliating erosion. I heard about it in fragments, like distant thunder rolling in from a storm I was no longer standing beneath. The friends who had drunk her champagne and praised her vision disappeared the moment the credit card was declined at a charity lunch. It turns out that social standing in her circle was less about loyalty and more about liquidity. When Lauren could no longer pick up the tab, she ceased to exist to them. Her narrative of being a self-made woman began to unravel with terrifying speed. People are observant. They noticed the contractors pulling away in their trucks, leaving piles of lumber rotting on the front lawn. They noticed the unfinished siding on the house, wrapped in Tyvek like a bandage on a wound that would not heal. They whispered, and for the first time, the whispers were not envious. They were pitying. Meanwhile, I was busy living. I did not buy a mansion to prove a point. I did not buy a sports car to race past her driveway. I bought a ticket to Florence. I spent my days walking through art galleries, staring at paintings that were hundreds of years old, realizing how small our petty dramas were in the face of history. I spent my evenings eating pasta in small, noisy piazzas, drinking wine that cost less than a bottle of water in the States. I was 56 years old, and for the first time in 30 years, I was breathing air that did not taste of obligation. I ran into Mrs. Higgins at the grocery store when I returned briefly to the city to settle some final paperwork with Daniel Reeves. She looked at me with wide eyes. I was wearing a new cashmere coat. and my skin was tanned from the Tuscan sun. I stood straighter. I took up more space. "Margaret," she asked, leaning over her shopping cart as if she were seeing a ghost. "My goodness, you look wonderful." We were so worried. We saw the moving truck. "And then Lauren said you had decided to downsize to a senior living facility because you could not manage the stairs. Is everything all right?" I smiled. It was a genuine smile, devoid of the bitterness I had carried for weeks. "I did not move to a facility. Martha," I said gently. "Lauren asked me to leave the house so she could use my room for a home office. She felt my presence was inefficient. I am currently living between here and Europe." Mrs. Higgins dropped a jar of olives. It shattered on the linoleum floor. A crash of glass and brine. She kicked you out," she whispered, ignoring the mess at her feet. "After everything you did. After you paid for that house for 30 years. "Yes," I said. "But it turned out to be the best thing she ever did for me. She gave me my freedom. I did not need to take out a billboard. The truth has a weight of its own, and gravity does the rest." Mrs. Higgins would tell the mailman. The mailman would tell the neighbors. By dinner time, the entire neighborhood would know that Lauren Holloway, the pillar of modern success, had evicted her own mother only to find herself living in a construction zone she could not afford to finish. I heard later that Lauren had tried to host a dinner party to save face, to prove that she was still on top. Nobody came. She sat in her half-renovated dining room, surrounded by expensive catering that she could not afford, and realized that she was completely alone. She had traded her mother for square footage, and now she had neither. She was learning the hardest lesson of all: you cannot buy back the people you discarded. My phone did not ring anymore. Lauren had stopped calling. Perhaps she was too proud. Perhaps she was too ashamed. Or perhaps she finally understood that I was not coming back to fix it. I was no longer the safety net. I was the sky. And she was falling. I remember sitting in a cafe on my last day in town, watching the autumn leaves fall onto the pavement. I felt a lightness in my chest that made me want to weep with relief. I had lost a daughter. Yes. That was a grief that would always sit in the corner of my heart, a quiet shadow. But I had found myself. I had found the Margaret who existed before the wife and the mother. "Are you ready to go?" "Ma'am?" the taxi driver asked, loading my red suitcase into the trunk. "Yes," I said. "I am ready." I did not look back at the town that had been my whole world for 3 decades. I did not look back at the house with the unfinished roof and the silent rooms. I got into the car and watched the road stretch out ahead of me, long and open and entirely mine. The check was paid. The debt was settled. The illusion was gone. And in its place was a piece I had never known I was missing. The final signature on the document was not a flourish. It was a simple, steady line of blue ink that severed the last legal tether between my daughter and my fortune. I sat in Mr. Sterling's office, looking at the revised last will and testament. The $4 million, along with the interest that had accrued over the last month, was no longer sitting in a pot waiting for Lauren to inherit it. It was now the seed money for the Holloway Foundation, a trust dedicated to providing financial literacy and legal aid to older women facing displacement. "Are you certain, Margaret, mister?" Sterling asked, peering over his spectacles. "This leaves Lauren with nothing. Not immediately. At least, no," I corrected him gently. "It leaves her with exactly what she claimed she wanted. Her independence. I had not done this to hurt her. Destruction is a messy, loud thing, and I was done with noise. This was not about ruining Lauren's life. It was about reclaiming my own. I had realized that as long as the safety net existed, she would never learn to walk on the wire. By removing the cushion, I was forcing her to finally feel the ground beneath her feet. I had heard through the grapevine that the house was on the market. The unfinished renovations had lowered the value significantly, and she was selling it at a loss to cover the bridge loans. She had moved into a 2-bedroom apartment near her husband's office. It was not a bad life. It was a normal life. It was the life she could afford. She was working again. Actually working. Not just consulting on imaginary projects. I walked out of the office and into the bright, crisp air of the afternoon. My phone was in my pocket, silent. I had blocked her number 3 days ago. It was not an act of malice. It was an act of preservation. I could not be her mother and her victim at the same time. And since I could not stop being her mother, I had to remove the victim from the equation. I thought back to that moment in the bank, the smell of the carpet cleaner and the hum of the air conditioner. I remembered Daniel Reeves looking at me with that intense, bewildered expression. "Do you know how rich you are?" He had meant the numbers on the screen. He had meant the stocks, the bonds, the compounding dividends. But as I hailed a taxi to take me to the airport for my flight to Paris, I realized he had asked a much deeper question. True wealth was not the $4 million sitting in the offshore accounts. True wealth was not the cashmere coat I wore or the first-class ticket in my purse. True wealth was the ability to wake up in the morning and know that my time, my space, and my dignity belonged exclusively to me. It was the power to say no. It was the freedom to close a door and know that it would stay closed until I decided to open it. I got into the taxi. The driver caught my eye in the rearview mirror. "Where to?" "Lady?" he asked. "The international terminal," I said. "And please, take the scenic route." I watched the city roll by, the skyline that I had built my life under fading into the distance. I was not angry anymore. I was not sad. I was simply free. The door to my old life was shut, locked, and the key was thrown away. And for the first time in 56 years, I was the one holding the handle. Thanks so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you guys are tuning in from today. Drop a comment down below with your city or country, and let me know what you would have done if you were in Margaret's shoes. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Nora Revenge Stories, smash that like button, and hit the hype button to help this video reach more people.